Trustees, we're a little bit delayed getting started this evening because we had an executive session to discuss personnel matters. And no actions were taken in that executive session. So we're going to start off with just a reminder to folks, our public hearing on our comprehensive plan and LWRP is still open. And if you have written comments that you wish to submit to the board, you can send them to any one of us. Our email addresses are on the village website, or you can send them to the clerk, Paula McCarthy Tompkins, at Village Hall at 28 Beekman Avenue here in Sleepy Hollow, and they will be distributed to the board. We expect to be able to put together our memo on changes that we would like to see or that we expect to make in both of those documents soon. And we will make sure that the notification that they're available will be widely distributed. That gives me an opportunity to plug the village email. Not opportunity, but you should, if you haven't already, you should sign up for our email blasts. It's a way of getting notifications on all kinds of things, including emergencies in the village, as well as notifications about all kinds of regular events and things like public hearings. So you would get notification when our comments, our memos are available as well. So you can sign up on the website, or you can reach out to the clerk to do that. So please do. Does anyone want to add anything on the comprehensive plan or the LWRP? If not, then we'll move forward on to our second discussion item. Ms. Giacchio, curbing and sidewalk bid.
Yes, a few weeks ago we went out to bid for concrete and curb work. This is for village work that we do periodically at various locations throughout the village. Damaged curbs that we have and sidewalks as well, including public sidewalks that the village is responsible for. We went out to bid. Peter J. Landy is the low bidder. We have a recommendation from our village engineer. Landy Associates have done 2 jobs for us recently, and we've been very pleased with their work. And I'd ask the village board to consider awarding this bid.
How did we determine the streets that are listed here?
That was done through both Wayne Ballard, our DPW super, and the engineer, going street by street.
Based on need?
Correct.
And just in a certain area?
I think they looked at various, the entire village, but I think this is where they saw the biggest need, or the biggest.
It seems like it's all in Phillipsburg Manor? Would that be a true statement?
Yes.
Yep.
Do they have an assessment that they went through where they did a priority? Because how much it looks like it's a total of 20, 50, 60.
It's 130,000.
Thank you. How much is there a budget that was for this? And
I believe we do have money in the capital budget for this. I'm not sure if it satisfies the full 130,000. We'd have to ask for more in the.
so they
in the next
believe
capital budget.
this area of Phillipsburg Manor is more in need than any other part of the village?
Based on their
On sidewalk?
evaluation, yeah.
Could we see?
Yeah, so what kind of study was done to,
I would have to have Wayne Ballard here if you want to
Yeah.
have come.
I think.
He did present to us.
Yeah.
No, I
in a
didn't,
meeting.
when you see it now zeroing in just
I
4
thought
or
there
5
were other
streets.
streets outside of Phillips Manor.
And then
Anthony.
you look at
I'm looking
sidewalks and
for
curbs
the-
throughout the entire.
I'm sorry?
Then when you start looking at all of the different neighborhoods, it just begs to not,
begs the question.
just seems like it's all concentrated in one neighborhood.
It may be,
So-
could it be for this, the first part of this project?
That's what I'm
He's
trying to-
working, concentrating on that area and then moving to the Weber Park and other parts of the village?
That's why I want to understand if there's an evaluation, because, and then if there's a budget that's attached to it, and then what would be the duration of it? I mean, there's just a couple of moving pieces. I know we talked about it, I know that this is something that's, it's needed and important, I just would like the story
How
and
about,
history behind it.
We have Mr. Ballard come in and explain the overall
Please.
timetable
Yeah,
for this work throughout the entire village, and revisit that and explain where this falls within it.
the only,
So before we vote on awarding the bid,
yeah.
we'll have that better conceptual sense.
The only thing that I can think of, and that's why I think it's really important to talk about, is that we've got a lot of improvement that is going on in the village, where a lot of this stuff might be covered with what they're doing with the sidewalks, with the whole repaving and the lights, and there's a lot of things that are going on with different grants right here in the village. So some of this stuff might be covered with repair through some of the things that we're doing. So that's why I want to understand from him. He's saying if I'm taking care of this beautification in this neighborhood with this work, then I would like to go into this neighborhood doing that. And that's why I think I would feel more comfortable seeing his comprehensive plan in that format. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next discussion item. We're considering applying for a program that provides grants for canine units. And we've had them in the past, and Chief Bowetti, who's a strong advocate for this program, and as a former canine officer here in Sleepy Hollow, has asked us to consider this grant, applying for a grant from this program. Chief, you want to walk us through what the grant does?
Yeah, so it's a foundation grant, so there really isn't a match to it, other than contractual obligations, which we'll get into shortly. So the Stratton Foundation does a grant. You get awarded up to an amount of $25,000 for equipment and such. You'll see on Appendix A, which would be the third, would be the model budget that we would apply for the $25,000, and the numbers are quite accurate. Also, which I haven't seen, they will reimburse up to $1,000 per week for every week that the officer is being trained. So basically what happens is when we get the dog, the officer will have to go to, we're hopefully applying for the Boston Canine School, because one of the requirements of the grant is out of Boston, Massachusetts State Police, or the Berkshire Training Academy. And that usually runs about 10 to 14 weeks. So they would reimburse us for up to $1,000 for overtime that's caused for that officer being out of the schedule.
So you're considering appointing a member of our department as the canine officer? We're not going to be looking to bring somebody new in who's already got this training?
Correct. And part of the application for the grant, sheets here. On the last packet, we'll go through the application process for the officer. And a lot of it is based on the grant itself. So it says, the officer must commit to a 5-year minimum. Officer must live locally or within a half-hour response time. Officer must realize that he's on call for 24/7 response. Officer must be willing to install or have an existing 6-foot fence enclosure on the property, on his property. Officer must agree to installing a house or kennel. And the officer must have at least a minimum of 2 years' experience with the Sleepy Hollow police officer. Then it says, we'll also have a interview process, tryout period with the city of Yonkers, where they have a very good canine program, where they would have the officers go down and actually give them a little taste of what it's like to be a canine officer. That would include taking a bite. There's a little obstacle course they'll run them through, simulating an instance where maybe the dog gets injured and you're carrying a 70-pound punching bag, 100 yards. Picking up the same punching bag, putting it through a window, mimicking the dog. So that that would be part of the tryout also.
Do you have a candidate who's interested or someone who's willing to volunteer for this?
Well, we have several that are interested. Per the collective bargaining agreement, we'd have to post it for 14 days
Okay.
and then go through the applications with that.
Mhm.
Now, one of the reasons I'm bringing this, like I said, there's really no deadline. It's a rolling deadline for this grant. But it would coincide with a possible capital request as far as a vehicle. As we found out in the past, that taking a line vehicle and then retrofitting it works, but not for as long as a new vehicle that already has the cage and the, it's called, what we used was the Ace Canine Hot and Top, which is a device that's installed in the vehicle. When the vehicle reaches a certain temperature, the sirens blare, the windows roll down, and there's a fan alerting that it's too hot for the canine in there, which is a key piece of equipment. You do read about it once in a while where these systems do fail and the dog winds up passing.
How do you schedule a canine officer?
He's the same. He rotates the 4-2 around the clock.
Mm-hmm. And so whenever the canine officer's on duty, the dog
The dog's on duty,
is with
yes.
the officer?
And traditionally, the canine dog has less sick time than the officer.
Has
So-
what?
Less
Sick
sick time
time.
than the officer does.
Well, that makes sense.
So,
Now, you said this was a rolling application, so once the application's submitted, how long does
I
it take till you find out if you've received the
They
grant?
didn't give us a date on how long it would take, but we would have to use the funds within 180 days
Of receiving the
of
grant?
receiving the grant.
But it
correct.
could be 6 months before you even find out, right?
It could. But I think we stand in a good position because we've had the unit, we have
Right,
the general orders already established.
okay.
So, after 3 years, could you apply again for the grant?
There is, I didn't print it out, but there is a second dog grant. So
No,
the
not
fir-
for another dog, but to continue to support the dog that you have.
No, I don't believe so. I think it's the 25 for the one.
So after 3 years, we're basically,
We've got a budget for it.
we've got a budget for it.
Correct, well, we have to budget for it immediately.
There's
'Cause,
a premium that you pay a canine officer.
Yeah, a canine officer gets he gets 3 hours of overtime a week, which comes out to be $12,792 a year. By the time this came to fruition this year, we'd be well into that. So that number would definitely come down as weeks go on.
Yeah, so
Obviously
that's an
comes
added
down.
cost. So I
That'd
guess
be an
one of
added
the
cost.
things that'd be helpful for us to know is like, what are all those additional costs? Because it's great that you get the grant, but the grant is really paying for a very small percentage of the costs associated with this
Right.
in the long term, especially if you want to buy a car.
Well,
Well,
you
right.
retro a car, right? You
What's that?
retro,
It's retro.
you retro a car, right? You refit a car that we already
We
have?
could, I'd recommend not doing that.
He wants to get a new car,
You want
As a capital
that's
project,
already
'cause
fitted for the
it-
dog.
Right,
It'll,
okay.
it'll last longer.
Okay.
As far as,
Chief, does the car go home with the officer?
it would.
Yeah.
It would. That's actually, if it didn't, we'd have to compensate the officer
Right.
for it. There's, I guess the case on it was Garcia versus the city of San Jose, where Officer Garcia wasn't receiving any contemporary benefits for it as far as taking care of the dog while at home. So he wound up suing, and that set a federal law that there has to be some compensation. 14 years ago, we came up with the agreement in the CBA that it'd be 3 hours of overtime a week, which would compensate that as well as a take-home car.
So you have a lot of experience with this, which is great.
Mhm.
So can you just tell us, what's the tangible benefits for the village? What should our expectations be in terms of what we'll accomplish by having the canine officer and the dog.
Biggest benefit that, even when I was a handler, I didn't foresee when I started was the community relations aspect. Everybody loves a dog, and when we did the demonstrations, it drew the biggest crowds at either the street fairs or the hayride, and it was just an absolute great community relations. I mean, I was on several domestics where we would do a demonstration for school children, and lo and behold, sometimes you'd go to their house where the mom and dad were fighting, and I remember one specific incident where the kid came out, well, they were screaming and said, "Hey, you're the canine guy, you did the demonstration," and it kind of calmed everything down. The parents brought a little serenity to them, they realized that their kid was there, that they were yelling, and we were able to refocus everything with that.
Mm.
So,
In terms of on the streets and reducing crime, is it basically,
It's-
for the most part, narcotics apprehension?
it'll be what they call a dual-purpose dog, and a dual-purpose dog is basically a patrol dog, which involves tracking. So if we have somebody that's gets lost out of Kendall in the Rockefeller Preserve there, the dog will be able to pick up the scent and track them that way. Evidence recovery, so if somebody's committed a crime and threw a piece of evidence into the woods, the dog would be able to recover that also. Of course, handler protection is also another aspect. And then with dual purpose, that's the patrol aspect of the dog. And then you can either do our narcotic dog or a bomb sniffing dog. Bomb sniffing dog, we would get use out of it, but we'd get more use out of a narcotic trained dog.
How long did you do it when you handled the dog?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
And the grant's for 1 year only, the contribution?
1 year contribution. correct.
$25,000.
Well,
Well, it
it's
looks
up
like
to
it
3 years.
covers-
Well, it covers
Covers food
startup.
for 3 years.
25,000 for 3 years, so it's 75 in total?
No, total
20.
25 would cover us for 3 years.
The $25,000 grant covers 3 years, not 1 year.
Well, I'm looking at the budget. Is that an annual budget or a 3-year budget? Because
No, that's-
the project cost is 25,000 for 1 year, I would imagine.
No, this is for 3 years, because it'll say,
Really?
that, the dog food for 3 years, which
So-
I still do have connections where we could have the dog food donated, the basic vet care donated also.
Great.
So Anthony, would the $4,500 for the conversion for the canine, would they apply that to a new car?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So you could deduct that from your capital budget, Bryce.
Request, right. What else? The vest we could get donated through, another interesting aspect with this dog, I went through the Yonkers School, so through the Yonkers School, you had a Yonkers certification, New York State certification, and the United States Police Canine Foundation certification. This dog would have those 3 certifications in addition to the Massachusetts State certification.
So bachelor, master.
Doctorate.
Doctorate.
So I think it would be helpful is what Sam was saying earlier, I think, Sam, right? Let's take, if you can get us the total cost, so we have a sense of, obviously, we don't know if we'd get the grant, but if we did, we would want to know what we would be potentially getting into in the extra cost,
Down the road.
or additional cost, I should say.
Will
I
do.
know you've been advocating for this
Day one.
since you, yeah,
For many years.
Day one?
yes.
Yes.
Long time.
What's the timing in terms of when these grant applications are due?
There is no,
It's a rolling.
No,
there's no,
it's
it's
ongoing.
rolling. It's not ongoing because it's the foundation, right?
Any other questions for the chief?
So what we're really deciding is if we're gonna apply for the grant, right?
Right.
And if we want to put it in the budget if we receive the grant.
Right.
Yeah, and we should make the decision if we want to apply for the grant based on,
Right.
okay, here's what our share is gonna be. And if we assume that we're gonna have a working dog that's part of the force, that it's gonna be for at least 5 years, it's probably a fair assumption. And, you know, that's gonna cost us this,
And, right, and like I said, this Millennium Strategies brought this across my desk, and talking to them, they felt that we'd be a strong applicant for it because of our history with the canine.
Mhm.
Sounds good to me.
okay?
Is Vinny gonna come out of retirement?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'll try, but
He might, once he hears this.
It's a one-man dog, one-dog man, whatever, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have been strong advocates of continuing training for all of our senior staff and for all of our staff, actually. And so there's a request to go to some NICOM trainings in September for the clerk and the deputy clerk, as well as the village treasurer. We would have to, as part of our policy, we have to approve that in advance. Those trainings are coming up in September 16th through the 18th for the clerk and the deputy clerk. The potential total cost of that is about $2,600. There's also a training around the same time, no, exactly the same time, excuse me, for the treasurer. That would, looks like it would be about $2,000 would cover the cost. So we would need to approve that, I would like to see us do that. You guys want,
Yeah.
you good with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
So let's put it on for next week then?
yep.
Yes.
Terrific. We need to, and just on that same note, there's a conference in Albany in October, I think on October 8th, that I want to attend. There's no conference fee, but it would be an overnight trip to Albany. It's around, it's not Lake Placid, they'd have to do it in Albany, they couldn't figure a better place, so. But it's around utility costs and promises to have some geothermal things and stuff like that, which I think would be particularly interesting, given where the state is trying to go with how we get our electric power and other things. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to go to, so I'll circulate that to folks. It's an invitation only, which I believe means elected officials and/or other officials of the village, so I'll check that out and see if, but if anybody else is interested in that, I'll circulate it.
If I can just speak on behalf of the entire board, we all think you need more training, so we're happy to send you.
Oh, I walked right into that.
You
one.
did.
Thank you, John.
I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding.
Let me throw
Should we
another
He's the
apply
hardest working man.
another
Should we apply
slope
for a
curve
grant?
that doesn't. Yeesh.
It is good
Rough
training.
crowd.
I know.
Okay. All right, our next and last discussion item is we need to look at what our meeting schedule will be in August, and I know we have an event the last week in August, so we'll have a board meeting next week, a regular board meeting, which will be the 13th. And then we could have a work session slash board meeting on the 20th. And then we would jump to September So the day after Labor Day would be our next regular meeting.
What's the event at the end of the month?
It's a
HHV.
meeting
What's the
with,
date?
28th.
it's on the 28th, and it's a meeting with the planning board and the zoning board.
I thought we were gonna take 2 days off in August.
Yeah, I thought we had discussed taking like the week off and then doing, no, didn't we discuss taking the week off
Hey,
and doing
tell me what you guys
both of
want to do.
those on the
We
27th?
normally
take
take
one
2 off, so,
Normal.
in August. So if we're here next week, on the 13th, then we would not be here on the 20th or the 27th, and then we would roll it into
Okay.
September 1st, second, what's the first? Who's got a calendar?
I do. It would be the
September
3rd.
3rd.
Should
doesn't
stagger
matter.
it though, right? You don't wanna, is there a warrant issue?
It's the only
We could do
question.
the warrant on the 3rd if we had to.
Boy, that was quick.
And I could use the time for
Ready for that, huh?
to research
Yeah,
No problem.
additional training opportunities.
Right.
I'm fine with whatever you decide.
Same.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I'm
I'm
hearing
not-
that
I'm-
we're not gonna meet on the 20th or the 27th, so let's put out an official announcement for that. So next week it will be a regular board meeting, and then we'll be meeting again on September 3rd.
Oh,
okay.
Okay?
Sounds
That
good.
completes our business for the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen, and good night.